Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements.
It is March 3rd, and
March
this
3rd.
morning, Governor Ducey has made it officially official that he's not running for the U.S. Senate.
Wow.
Something that I think we all knew for quite a while, but for whatever reason, people didn't think no meant no.
Well, I think there are a lot of, from what I've heard from different folks, is that there's a lot of people on the sidelines, especially very large different donors, who were hoping against hope. I know for a fact that Governor Ducey had been approached by all sorts of folks from all over the fruited plain to run for the Senate.
Most significantly, Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, I think Senator Kyle had been part of that discussion, along with some other, Karl Rove, I know had been part of that discussion. However, I'd like to think that the governor looked at the landscape and what it would take to do such a thing, and maybe decided against it.
Well, and I actually think it was
I think he
not even
decided
a
a
decision.
while ago.
This is he never went into this to be a career politician.
Yeah.
And I think what he said in his letter about his instinct about being an executive was exactly where his head was before he ran for office, which is why he ran for state treasurer and then governor.
Yeah.
And being in a legislative body is just not interesting for him.
Yeah.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, the only benefit I could see him running for Senate and winning is if he had every intention of running for president and wanted that as part of the resume, so to speak.
Yeah,
Because you
I
get
don't
exposed
think-
to a lot of
I don't
foreign
think
policy
going
stuff.
to the Senate does that much to help with.
Okay.
I mean, Barack Obama is the only person in decades that went from the Senate to president. I mean, since JFK.
Yeah, and he was the least qualified senator.
Yeah.
And least qualified
President.
president. that we've had in
Every other
decades.
former senator who's become a president has been a vice president. Lyndon Johnson and Biden.
Yeah.
All the rest have been governors.
So maybe there's an opportunity there. if
Yeah,
that's what he's
again,
looking
I
at.
mean,
don't know.
will he run for president? I don't think so, because I think that, again, he did not get into politics as a career. He got into politics to make a difference, and I think he's done a great job. I think the last 8 years in Arizona have been great, and he has had a great impact on the state. He's had a great impact. He will have a great impact on a bunch of other states as is in his role as RGA chair this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And he has loved that from the beginning.
oh, yeah.
You know, I know that personally. That's
Well, and
been
he-
one of his great passions, the RGA, and he's done great work with.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of speculation, spun back up that he was thinking about running for Senate when he gave this pretty powerful State of the Union or State of the State address, and then put out a video talking about the great things that and people are like, well, he's running for, and I was like, no, he's demonstrating leadership by showing other governors, hey,
This is how you do it.
He leads by example.
Yeah.
That's been his mantra, I think. So anyway,
And with all
That's
the
the
other red
news.
state governors trying to be in the spotlight, what's been, I think, really humbling is that he hasn't tried to be in the spotlight
no, I mean he's
with all the different COVID policies.
yeah,
and
he's put his head
he-
down and done the right thing.
yeah.
So.
Had a couple stumbles early on, but then pivoted, and our state has benefited.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
tremendously.
clearly our state's in way better shape than the vast majority of other states as a result
Just
of
take
where it was.
California. We don't have to talk about the vast majority of states.
It just
we can
takes
just
one.
look west.
Just look west and thank God.
And there it comes.
All right. State of the Union was earlier this week. And I get the sense that while, because State of the Union addresses take a long time to work on, they take a long time to do, I feel like they did a little, because of the situation in Ukraine and the atrocities of Putin, it changed the speech. And I think Biden did a pretty good job at the beginning of the speech talking about what was going on with Ukraine and what the United States and other NATO allies had done and were doing. But then it just quickly slipped right back into standard.
Putting lipstick on a pig.
Yeah. And
That's the first thing I thought of when I was listening.
There were a
this
couple-
is just the same stuff.
it's the same old, same old. Now, there were a couple moments that I thought were good highlights. And one was talking about We shouldn't defund the police. We should fund the police. Fund them. Fund them.
Okay.
Hey, that's a direct shot right at the hard progressive
Yeah, but
left.
is he really serious about that?
I think so. I think he is. I think now will that
What,
will that
what about the
demonstrate?
woman who was standing over his right shoulder,
She
who
was,
had a fund to bail out BLM
she
protesters?
it was fascinating to watch how
And we're talking about the
often-
vice president.
how often Kamala watched Pelosi. Pelosi took the lead on every standing ovation.
Yeah, but Pelosi was like doing weird things behind the
Really,
camera with
yeah.
her face and with her hands. There's been all sorts of analysis about that.
Who knows?
Nobody knows what it is.
What was striking to me was how, I mean, it's, if you go back to most of the states of the union, and especially when you have the party of control, when it's your vice president and the speaker is someone that is in your party, it's usually, they're very stoic. All the attention is on the president. And yet there's a lot of both Kamala and Speaker Pelosi, the vice president and Speaker Pelosi, were creating a lot of distractions
Yeah.
by their facial expressions. And the greatest moment of the speech was when Chuck Schumer jumped up to clap and realized, nobody's here with me. Sit
And
back
sat down. Well, there's an also telling moment in the speech, and it hasn't been given a lot of press, and that was where Joe Manchin sat.
He sat on the Republican side.
He sat on the Republican side.
Yeah.
And if you're, most of all, probably he didn't want to, have the glares of Sandy Cortez behind him, like ones previous.
She got to the speech so late that she had to sit up in the
She had
balcony
to sit up in the balcony,
Yep.
so she couldn't glare.
because
at everybody.
they did social distancing even
Yeah.
though there was no masks, and so they didn't have people sitting right next to each other. They
Yeah,
had
Senator
an empty
Barrasso
seat.
from Wyoming was like hanging out on the chair. Everyone they weren't piled in there like sardines.
Yeah.
But one thing about the Ukraine, part of the speech that is a concern to me is that there wasn't really any forward-looking part of that speech. It was, this is what we did, here's what is going to happen to Putin, but nothing in terms of here's what we're going to do now and make sure that. So are we going to increase our military spending to, I guess it's 3% of GDP right now, to up to 4.5% of GDP, which we should do. What are we going to do to shore up NATO? What are NATO allies going to do? And we talked about this in another podcast. I think the biggest news of the week was Germany.
Absolutely. They have gotten off their asses. And
All of a sudden, the Germans
engaged.
are going to act like Germans again and defend the continent.
Yeah.
And hopefully that holds.
Yeah. I
And
hope
they're
so.
they've made a stated goal that they're going to spend 2% of their GDP, if not more, 2.5%, I think. And they're gonna send arms and all sorts of aid to Ukraine. So
yeah,
that's a good
and
thing.
on the Ukraine issue, I think that the thing that I agree, he didn't point out what was next, and he also didn't really go into, hey, this is going to cost us, in the sense of energy prices because of his own policy, and he didn't want to admit that his policies, like killing Keystone Pipeline and taking us off of where President Trump was when we were energy independent. We now import 600,000 barrels of oil a day
From Russia.
from Russia.
Yeah, that is
And
causing
this,
the most
you know,
outrage, and
every
rightfully
time
so.
a president says, "Oh, I'm tapping the strategic reserve, 30 million barrels,"
60, I think, and that's a drop in the bucket.
Well, we consume 18 million barrels a day
Yeah.
in the United States. So that's 4 days.
Yeah.
That doesn't go very far. Not
No.
even 4 days, 3.5 days. So we're going to there's going to be increasing inflation, gas prices, et cetera. And the other problem with the speech was that everything he talked about growing inflation, and everything he talked about as part as a so-called solution inflation was just more inflationary. Spend.
Yeah.
So I don't think it.
Well, I heard
did-
yesterday from somebody who looks at this very, very closely that he expects gas to go to $200 a barrel.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. If not higher.
That's
And if the Chinese, well, his point was if the Chinese invade Taiwan, on top of that,
which they will.
$400 a
Yeah.
barrel.
No,
Everything gets.
I
gets
feel
disrupted.
like that's not even in a question anymore. I think that's just a matter of when, and that's
That's
awful.
a bigger that affects America directly.
Well, especially because if we tried to impose on China the sanctions that we've imposed on Russia, it would have a huge economic impact on us because
Absolutely.
of how much of dependence we have on Chinese manufacturing.
Yeah.
And the challenge is there is no easy solution because, in his speech about everything being made in America, that's going to be inflationary.
That's
People need to understand
inflationary.
if we do this, we're going to pay more, and it's going to hurt. I mean,
Yeah, it's amazing that he just doesn't understand how markets work.
well,
And so you have commodity.
he's been in
markets,
Washington for 50 years.
Yeah, you have commodity markets that work very efficiently, and the reason why gas is where it is because
markets work.
Markets work. We have an open market, and if the same thing goes for steel, which part of what he was proposing, buy American steel to help build our roads and everything else, that's going to be expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I think the number one policy that he could put in place that would have, if not immediate impact, definitely, quick impact would be a above everything, all of the above strategy. Start drilling, all of the energy
Well, I
production.
mean, invest in innovation, take the shackles off in terms of regulation of the oil and gas. Right now, oil and gas companies aren't investing,
No.
and that's part of the reason. They're producing about as much as they did before the pandemic, but there's no new investment, no new refining capacity coming on board. That's it. Nothing is being done to address the supply side, which we are supply side economic people, and they're just trying to influence demand, and that's why prices are out of control.
Well, right, because if
it is a supply issue.
Like in California, if by 2035, I think it is, you cannot sell a non-electric car in the state of California, you're all about demand, and it's an artificial inflator.
Yeah, whenever you try to influence demand and pick winners and losers on the demand side, prices go up.
Yeah,
we saw that in the 70s. And we're seeing that even with the proposal of wage and price controls on drugs. Same thing.
Yeah. So I don't think the speech did what it needed to help the president or the Democrats in general. I mean, he might get a little bit of a bounce. Who knows? His ratings are the lowest they've ever been. He's under 40.
I think he's going to go below 30.
Do you really?
And then things, especially with independents. Yes,
well, he's already close to 30.
Yeah,
below
with
30
independents. I mean, he's under that. But if he continues to slide below 60 with his own party, they're in deep trouble. And he didn't really give them enough meat to chew on to go back to their districts to run on. I mean, he made mention of not defunding the police. He made passing mention of fixing the border, but his idea of fixing the border is granting amnesty to pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
Rather than border enforcement, which he made passing glances to new technology, not apprehending people and sending them back to their countries.
And as typical Democrats, they think that they need to pass big things in order to show the American people. I don't think that's. I mean,
I don't think
need to
much
get
of
out of the
anything
way.
gets passed this year.
Well, I know.
I think
They
it's
just in the divided Senate.
I think the budget is just going to be a big CR. It's gonna come back for a vote after the election. I think you're totally right on that. And it might even be a 2-year CR, so they don't have to deal with it again.
Well,
but you don't know.
No, I don't think. I think the Republicans want this thing. They may push it. Well, it'll be interesting.
They'll probably push it
till after the election. I don't think they'll push it to the next session of Congress. Because
Yeah, that might
the
be a little
Democrats,
wishful thinking.
the Democrats will want to have at least some impact before they lose their majority. I mean, they'll lose the majority in the election, but they won't. That transition doesn't happen until the first week of January. So it'll be somewhere between November 8th or 9th, whenever the election is, and January, whatever. Let's say December 31. So they still have some say because at this point, there's no question they're going to lose the House in my mind. None.
Just by how much?
It's just just a matter of how much. And I'm feeling more bullish about them losing the Senate and Republicans recapturing the Senate. So,
well, it's good for you to be bullish.
I guess.
Yeah.
Until I'm wrong.
You know, well,
I've been bullish before and wrong.
But
2012.
And he gives the opposition a lot of meat, for lack of a better phrase, a lot of meat to chew on as well. One of which being his assault on assault weapons the other night. And I don't know if he's watching what's happening in
Deer
Ukraine.
don't wear Kevlar vests.
Yeah, that was one of the dumbest.
When he goes off script, it
statements.
usually does not go well.
Yeah, ever. And it every time he talks about gun control, every time any Democrat talks about gun control, all it does is ammunition gets scarcer. More people go out and buy guns. I would imagine, I haven't looked at the latest numbers, but the sale of assault rifles right now, the sale of every type of gun you can imagine, if people are watching what's happening in Ukraine, is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Breaking new records. And you couldn't get much better than the last couple of years.
Right.
And I bet it's breaking new records. And
Yeah.
his speech the other night,
not going to help.
the NRA just sits back and goes, "Thank you very much."
Does the NRA even exist anymore?
Oh yeah, they're moving to Texas. Well, I mean, you can go down the list. National Shooting Foundation, Gun Owners of America.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of
all the different advocacy,
Well,
Second Amendment rights advocacy groups. Just send out mailers and raise more money, and people go out and buy more guns.
Well, and it's really not even. I mean, organizationally, it's very. I mean, the NRA's had its issues, and maybe they'll get through all that. But the fact is, there's tens of millions of gun owners in America, and there are more now than there have ever been. Because
even more minority gunners
Yeah.
than there ever been. And we can thank the summer of 2020 for that.
Right.
And the Democratic leadership in Los Angeles and Seattle and Minnesota and New York.
Chicago.
Yep.
Well, I would say the state of our union is a little bit of a mess.
It's a big mess.
It's
And
going
it's
to take
gonna get worse.
It's probably going to get worse. And it's going to make for a fascinating few months as we lead up to the election, which we will obviously be covering on basically a weekly basis.
Yeah.
We might not cover it every week, but I'm guessing.
Well,
as
and we're
getting
hoping to
closer,
have
there's more.
some of the folks running for different
We've had
offices
some.
here.
We'll have
We've had
some
some.
more.
We're going to have a lot more. So
Yeah,
that should be very interesting.
it will
Get
be
their
very
take
interesting.
on why they're running and what they're wanting to do for the great state of Arizona, for the country.
That's right. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody.
God bless.
Have a great day.